Okay, so here we go. Here's what I need you to remember. First of all, if you did not get your mountain math to me today, I need it. It's going to go in as a 0 until I get it back from you. Okay, we just talked about that. Does everybody see up top on the title of your notes today how the word standard form is in all caps and underlined? That's what we're talking about today, is standard form. Tomorrow we'll talk about something called vertex form. Okay, this chart that we're going to fill in right now, we're going to fill in a lot for the next week or so. Okay, this is going to help us determine these 3 functions. Does everybody see the titles across the top of that? Linear, exponential, and quadratic. The quadratic one is going to be all new to you. That's the stuff we're working on today. Linear and exponential we've already talked about. You should be able to help me fill this stuff in. Okay, what does linear mean? It's a line. So down here, this is where I'm going to put what the graph looks like. A linear equation produces a line when it's graphed. What does a linear equation look like? What form is it in? You got it. Yep. What's the different parts of that? What does the M stand for? Slope. And what does the B stand for? Which of those do I start at? The y-intercept. And then I use a slope to find other points, correct? Now, does the slope ever change halfway through a line? No, it doesn't. Because linear equations are used for consistent change. Meaning if it goes up by 4, it always goes up by 4. If it goes down by 7, it always goes down by 7. It doesn't ever change. It's consistent. Everybody all right with that? Does that make sense to you? Now, we're not going to fill in that third box for right now. I'll come back to that later, okay? Then we have exponential equations. Guys, what word do you see in exponential? Exponent. This is where you have a variable in the exponent, okay? We've talked about these. It's been a little while, so I want to remind you. Exponential equations look like that. What does the B stand for? It's not the y-intercept. Oh, the percent? Nope, you're going to answer that for letter A. She actually gave me letter A. The letter A is the percentage. Percent of change. So we might have said that your truck depreciates by 10% every year. Or we might say the number of bacteria doubles every time. Do you guys remember those types of problems? What did the B stand for? No. The starting amount. Okay, the starting amount. Because remember, the B in the slope-intercept form is always where we start at, correct? B, think of as beginning or the start. Now, the reason we would choose to use this equation is to show a percent of change. Show a percent of change. Now, there were a couple words that we used in these equations that weren't percentages. Do you remember what they were? That still indicated a percent, but it didn't like come flat out say 20%. Yeah, we always had to turn them all into percentages, but these words didn't physically have that percentage symbol on them. No, we do need to change them into decimals. What do all percents start out as? All percents are out of 100, correct? What if I wanted to say it grew by 200%? What would that actually be? What is that called when you multiply something by 2? Double. So even though the word double doesn't have a percentage on it, we knew that meant to do a exponential equation. Well, obviously, if I do double, I can do triple. Okay, we never did talk about really quadruple and anything like that. We went as far as triple. But what about if I took it down to 50%? That would be half. Okay, so those words, even though they don't have a percentage symbol in them, meant to use an exponential equation for percent of change. Okay, and again, we did not graph these things. But what happens if you take a number and you raise it to a power? What does that number get? Way bigger, correct? So these things go up super fast, or they could go down super fast. So when we would graph one of those, they would look like either of those two things if we were to graph them. They either go up super fast or down super fast. These are exponential equations. Okay. Anybody have any issues there? Again, except for this bottom part right here, we've talked about all this stuff before, yes? Okay, today is the new stuff. It is quadratic equation. Standard form of a quadratic equation looks like this. So if it's not in that order, you need to get it in that order. Y equals ax squared plus bx plus c. The a, the b, and the c are numbers. Okay, those are going to be your coefficients, whatever the numbers in front are. Is that all right for everybody? Okay, the most important point is called a vertex. Okay, and I'll show you what that means once we get these graphing. But I have a formula for the vertex. The formula is negative b over 2a. That's your formula to find the vertex. And the a and the b come from the equation. Those are the numbers up there. Okay. We use quadratic equations if they have, or if we want to show a max or a min. They will always show a max or a min because the shape of these things is a parabola. Parabolas are U-shaped. If it has a maximum, it's going to look like this. Do you all agree that that looks like it has a highest point? Yes. If it has a minimum, it's going to look like this. Do you agree that that has a lowest point or a minimum? How we doing here, guys? Does this all make sense to you? Okay. That's what we're going to be graphing today, are these U shapes. They're called parabolas. They're either going to be right side up or they're going to be upside down. Oh, I don't know what the thing from science is. Oh, no, sorry. Okay, now we do have a couple more things I want to be reminded of down here. What is domain? Domain is all of the x's. Which way do x's travel? Left and right. What does the range represent? All the y's. Which way do y's travel? Vertical, which would be up and down. And that's stuff that we've talked about before. We talked about input and output. Okay. I think I'm ready to get to my first problem there. I know. Are we ready? First thing I want to know, if you look at this equation up here, is it in the correct order? Does it look like y equals, no. What's this? See how it has a highest power of 2? So this is quadratic. Does it look like this? Yes, it does. It's in the right order, isn't it? Okay, that's good. I don't need to rearrange it. Do you see how I crossed off a table of values and put Desmos? Okay, please do that because you are going to use Desmos for this whole thing. It's going to do 90% of the work for you. Okay, now you see how I have A, B, C, D, and E here? If you look at your directions, it tells you what A, B, C, and D, and E are. Okay, what does letter A ask you to find? The vertex. Now, I just gave you a formula for the vertex. What was it? What is the B in this problem right now, folks? Nope. What's the B? Okay, so folks, this is what my equation is supposed to look like, correct? Yes? Yes or no? This is the equation that I have up here. What's the B? The B is 2, isn't it? You see how that's in the B slot? Now, this formula, though, says negative B. So it's going to be negative 2. We doing all right? Not a day you can zone out on me, guys. Over 2 times, what's the A right now? It's a 1. You agree there's a 1 in front of there. So what is 2 times 1 down there? What is negative 2 over 2? You got it. That is the y value for the vertex. Excuse me, I apologize. That is the x value for the vertex. Do you see how I started it as an ordered pair? We have to now use Desmos to find the y value. So what you're going to do is you're going to type in this equation that we have up here into Desmos, and it's going to show you what this parabola is going to look like. So let's do that. Can you read me back that equation, please? Oh, it shouldn't be v. Y equals. Okay. Do you agree that this thing is a U shape? It's a parabola. Okay. Now, what did we say the x value of the vertex was? We found it to be negative 1. Do you agree that right here is negative 1 on the x-axis? Follow it down to the curve. Do you agree it's that point right there? Does everybody see this? The vertex is always the very lowest or the very highest, okay? In this case, is it a high or a low? It's a low point, okay? What's the value for the y here? Negative 4. So I'm going to go back here, and I'm going to say my y value is negative 4 because that's what Desmos told me. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put that point on my graph. How we doing so far, folks? Okay, now, that parabola is symmetrical. Do you know what symmetrical means? On both sides, correct? Can you take a look up here at my parabola, and do you agree that this would be the line that would cut it straight in half? Do you agree that this goes through the vertex that we just made? That is called the axis of symmetry. Look at letter B in your directions. Letter B asks you for the axis of symmetry. What kind of line is this? It's vertical. So which axis does it not touch? The y-axis. If it never touches the y, it can't have a y. So what is it going to start with? An x. An x. And what was the x value down here? Nuh-uh, the x value. Negative 1. That x value is negative 1. So back here, for letter B, my axis of symmetry is going to be x equals negative 1. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to draw it lightly on my graph because that's going to cut my graph in half. Okay, what does letter C ask you? Max or min? Does this thing have a max or a min? It has a min. It had a lowest point, so that's all I'm going to put there. Okay, now I'm asking for domain and range. Now, here's my graph again. Domain is all of the x's, agreed? Do you agree that x's go left and right? So if I keep going on this thing, it's going to go this way, right? Yes? And it's going to go this way, yes? Do you agree it's going to keep getting wider? So eventually I'm going to hit 172 over there, and eventually I'm going to hit negative 507 over here. Eventually, if I keep getting wider and wider and wider. So what x's am I actually going to use? No. What x's is this graph going to touch as we go? I just said we're going to do it 172 over there, right? And we're eventually going to get to 547 over here, correct? Am I eventually going to hit all of those as I keep getting wider and wider and wider? This thing is just going to keep getting wider, and it's going to keep spreading and expanding and expanding. And eventually, I'm going to hit whatever x values I want to if I make it big enough. Does that make sense to you? So my domain is going to be all real numbers because I can make it as wide as I want. And this little funny looking R thing means all real numbers. The domain is all real numbers. Now, the y is the range, isn't it? Yes? So now I'm going to go back to my graph, and I'm going to talk about the y's. Which way do y's go? So if I look at this graph, this thing only goes which direction? Nuh-uh. It only goes up, does it? Which means it has to have a very lowest point. Well, we said it had a minimum, so of course it has a very lowest point, yes? Isn't that point right down here? Since we're talking about range, which is y's, what is the y down there? -4. So do you agree that all the y's have to be bigger than -4? Do you agree that that would be greater than -4? Yes, bigger means greater. So the y's are greater than or equal to -4. That is my range. All right, finally, what does letter E ask me to find? The y-intercept. So look at your graph there on Desmos. Where does this thing cross the y-axis? Right here. 0, -3. So that is your answer to letter E. Now, folks, isn't this a point? So put it on your graph. 0, -3. And isn't that green line that I have there called the axis of symmetry? So if I have a point right there, don't I also have to have a point over here that's the mirror image of it? Okay, so now I got a start to my U shape. Okay, I just need you to find one more nice point for me on that parabola. Looking at this graph, can you find me one more nice point? By nice, I mean it crosses at a whole number. Okay, 5 zeros right here. 0, 5 is right there. What are you telling me? -3, 0? It's not actually right on negative. Oh, yes, it is right on -3, 0. Does everybody see this point? Good. So I'm going to go back to my graph, and I'm going to go to where -3, 0 is. And if I have a point right there, don't I have to have another point on the other side? So make a mirror image. Now, when I say mirror image, I am counting to this axis of symmetry. How many units do I have to go to get to the axis of symmetry? Ooh, not 3. I have to get 2 to get to this green line. And then I'm going to have to go 2 past it to get the mirror image of it. Does that make sense to everybody? This is my parabola. That is my final graph. I've answered all the parts to this question, and that's exactly what I'm looking for. Now, is it a lot of work? Yes. But at least Desmos will do most of it for you. Okay? Are we good? Okay, let's go on to the back and let's look at number 2. First thing I want to ask you, does this thing look like it's in standard form? It does, correct? Yes. Okay, so if it's in standard form, I have an A, a B, and a C. The most important point, and that letter A asked me for, is the vertex. What is your formula for the vertex? Negative B over 2A. What is the B in this problem? It's -4. So if I make it negative, then it turns into +4 over 2 times, what's my A? -1 is my A. So what's actually in the denominator here? -2. What is 4 divided by -2? Wonderful. So that is the x coordinate for my vertex. Now you're going to type in your equation, and we're going to see what we come up with here. And I will need somebody to read that back to me, please. Okay, so is this a parabola? Yes, it's just upside down this time. Where's your vertex? Right there. -2, 3. So I'm going to go back to my question here, and I'm going to say -2, 3. I'm going to put my point on my graph, and remember that that is also where your axis of symmetry is. That's the line that will cut this thing right down the middle. It is vertical, isn't it? So which means it's going to start with an x. And what does x equal here? -2. So when I go back to write in my axis of symmetry for letter B, I'm going to say x equals -2. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to draw that axis of symmetry right on my graph. What did letter C ask me for? Does this thing have a max or a min? It has a maximum. It has a highest point. Letter D is domain and range. Domain is which one again? The x's. And x's go left and right, correct? What happens to this thing as I continue it all the way down? And it goes to the left and it goes to the right, doesn't it? So what x's am I eventually going to hit? Anything I want over there, right? And anything I want over here? So what's that going to be? All real numbers. Parabolas will always get as wide as you want to make them. Okay, so you can end up hitting all real numbers. What about my range? Range is which one again? The y's. If I look at my y's, those go up and down, don't they? Which way does this parabola go? Down. It only goes down, which means it has to have a highest point, which makes sense because we said it had a max. What is the highest y? 3, right there. So are all the y's greater than 3 or less than 3? Less than 3, because that's a maximum, so everything has to be lower than it. Okay. Letter E was asking you for the y-intercept. Where does this thing hit the y-axis? Is it 0, -2? Oh, well, I better look. I was taking your guys' word for it. Here's my y-axis, correct? Where does it hit the y-axis? 0, -1. Now that's a point, isn't it? So go ahead and put it on your graph, 0, -1, and then make the mirror image of that point. How many units is that from the axis of symmetry? 2. So if I go 2 units past it, I get the mirror image. Last thing I need is one more nice point from you. Can you look at that parabola and find me another nice point? Work. -4, -1. Now here's the thing though. It's nice, but we already have it because that was the mirror image of my y-intercept. So can you find me another one? Can you find me another nice point? -5, -6, he says. That looks like it's good, right? Does everybody see that? -5, -6? Okay, so let's go ahead and put that on my graph. -5, -6. How many units is that from the axis of symmetry? How many? From the axis of symmetry? It is 1, 2, 3 units away. So if I want the mirror image, I'm going to go 1, 2, 3 units away. Does this thing look like a U shape? And it looks exactly what Desmos showed me on my graph. So do you guys see how we find the vertex and then Desmos will give you the other points? Yeah, it really is. Okay. Are we all right with this or no? Okay, so I'm going to start this next one. I don't know if I'll get it finished or not, but it looks really odd. That does not look like I want it to look, agreed? Now, if this is standard form, the x squared is supposed to come first, isn't it? What's my x squared term up here? -1/3 x squared. What is my regular x term? I don't have one, do I? So I'm going to say plus 0x because there are no x's up there. And then this c is my constant. What's my constant? Nope. See that guy right there with no variable on it? It's 4. Now, does this look like it's in standard form? Yes, it does. This is the A, this is the B, and this is the C. 0x because there is no x's. There are no x's in the original problem. So we kind of put it in there as a placeholder. We doing all right, guys? The most important point is the vertex, so that's what I need to find. The formula for that is -b over 2a. What's my b up there right now? 0. If I make it negative, it's still 0, isn't it? Over 2 times what's my a? Now, folks, here's the thing. It doesn't matter what the denominator is because 0 divided by anything is 0. So that is the x value for my vertex. Now you can go ahead and type that into Desmos, and we're going to find our parabola. Type it in. Hold on one second. Can you read it back to me? Y equals, was it -1/3? Okay, so my vertex is right here, and like Derek is telling me, it's 0, 4. Is that okay? Put it on your graph. And folks, that vertex cuts the graph right in half. So I can put my axis of symmetry on here, right through there. Now here's my problem with this axis of symmetry. It's still vertical. But for the other ones, I told you it had never crossed the y-axis, so it can't have a y, correct? This one is on the y-axis, isn't it? What are all of the x values on the y-axis? No, what are all the x values on the y-axis? Like, what's this x value right here? 0, correct? What's this x value right here? 0. So all of these x values are 0. So my axis of symmetry is x equals 0. All right, does this thing have a max or a min? It has a max, so that's my answer to letter C. Can you tell me the domain? The x's to the left and to the right. What happens to this thing? So it is all real numbers. Now let's talk about the range. The range is the y's, that's up and down. Does this graph go all the way up or all the way down? It goes all the way down, which means it has a very highest point, correct? What was the y value at that very highest point? 4. So are all the y's bigger than 4 or less than 4? Less than, because remember that was a max, so we're going to say y is less than or equal to 4. Now, what's the y-intercept? Where does this thing cross the y-axis? What's the ordered pair? 0, 4. Do you agree that my y-intercept is the same as my vertex? Okay, so I had no extra points. So I'm going to need you to go on your graph, and I'm going to need you to find me probably 2 points. Let's see here. She says -6, -8. Yep. Do you guys see how that's going to be a good one right there? If it'll let me stop on there. There it is. I don't have a mouse. Well, I'm at the smartboard. -6, -8, which would be right here. Guys, how far away from the axis of symmetry is that? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's my mirror image. Can you find me one more? Got one for me? Okay, you're really going to have to wait. I'm almost done. What do we got here? Give me another point. Find me where it crosses a nice square. How about -3, +1? Yep. -3, +1. Which means my mirror image would be here. And then I get my parabola shape. Okay. Does that make sense to everybody? Do you see how I only really had to find 2 points, but it actually gives me 4 points because of the mirror image? Okay. So this is what you're going to be asked to do on your homework tonight. Okay. I have a worksheet for you.